You're listening to the Digital Deep Dive, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital landscape. From Amazon and D2C to international expansion, join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brands in the digital arena. Now, here's your host, Aaron Conant.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Digital Deep Dive podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Conant, and here today we're going to tackle digital first creative. And so I have a lot of people bringing up in the brand conversations I'm having right now, the burden that is creative and the traditional way of creating it and how you're doing it and the usage and the number of touch points it has to have, the cost and everything in there. And we just have some great friends, partners, supporters of a lot of brands that we run into on a daily basis over at Blue Whale Media. And Zach's been a longtime friend for, I don't know, I think pretty much since we kicked this off, right?
I was going to say, it's probably been like five years now.
Yeah, and we've only been around for 6. So
yeah.
No, awesome. But Zach, I don't mind you like jumping in. If you want to do a brief intro on yourself and Blue Whale and how you're helping people out, that'd be awesome. And then we can kind of jump into this, digital first creative, like how should people be thinking about it? And I also want to get into the agency aspect a little bit because I've got a lot of questions coming up on that side as well. For sure.
Well, I really appreciate it. As you mentioned, we've been colleagues and friends for 5 years now. It's my first time doing the podcast, so I really appreciate that. It's a long time coming. But in terms of who I am and what Blue Whale is, so I'm the VP of sales for Blue Whale. I've actually been with them for over 11 years. And we are an omni-channel performance marketing agency and marketplace management company. So what does that mean? We help brands from click to ship, from the moment they find their consumer online to being able to fulfill across their D2C and their marketplace efforts. So that's us in a nutshell. One of the things, as you mentioned, that we've been doing for a long time is really on the performance advertising side. And one of the things that we found really in the last couple of years is that everyone is approaching their advertising, especially right now, right? Like we're kind of going through this period where efficiency is a big word that everyone's using. I'm kind of coming from the place where people have, hey, 2x, 3x, 4x to now I need the most efficiency. I need to make sure I'm hitting my profitability numbers. And one of the things that we're doing is everyone's managing their audiences. Everyone's having different naming conventions and different attribution strategies, but very rarely are we evaluating creative as like a data point, right? So how do we make it better? How do we optimize it? How do we make it more efficient? How does it help with our advertising? So instead of creative being this kind of afterthought or this thing that marketing thinks of, or a high-level creative team creates this traditional creative that just sits out there, and then my digital team, they get the remnants, right? They get the revision of the revision. They get this big brand video that's now been edited down for their little social channel, right? And that's not how creative works. We are now in a digital first environment. We are now in an area where we need to build creative specifically for digital performance. And we need to be thinking about how that creative performs digitally. So that's where we come from, is taking over from that kind of traditional view of content, which again is, I'm going to create this really great brand video. It's going to be used in store. We're going to then cut that down to a 30-second video. And then we're going to give our ads teams a bunch of 5 or 10-second clips. But what it doesn't consider is where those clips are going, where the prospect is in their journey, where the prospect is on the platform. Is this content even, applicable to the platform? Are we trying to take Instagram content and shove it on TikTok? That is not going to work. So the first thing is this idea between traditional creative and now this digitally native creative.
And so the traditional creative, does that still stick around? And it just has a lower emphasis. And then you now have to have this whole different set, because I know exactly what you're talking about, right? Coming from the brand side was, here's the brand guidelines. Here we do a massive photo shoot or a video, and then a digital team go to try to make this work. They still need that, right? But it's just,
and I think the idea
having to be a priority
prioritization and looking at where we're putting our ad dollars, where we're expecting our return from. And so a lot of these brands are, especially ones that we've been talking to that have been retail heavy for so long, that are looking for now digital shelf life, whether that's Amazon or D2C. This is sometimes a relatively new venture for them. And so they're learning to split off some of their creative dollars in order to support that. So there is still a need for that. You still need that high quality content. But believing that you can do one shoot a year and then edit that shoot, or twice a year and edit that creative, and that it's going to get you to your end, digital needs, is just not the case anymore.
Well, no, I mean, but it's the idea that they want to save money, right? And it does save money. That's the reality.
Well, so there's two parts to it. One, it's going to make your advertising more effective, right? But to your point, when we sit down to make a shoot, we're kind of thinking about the whole buffalo. We're thinking about, okay, where is your content going for the next 6 months? Is it going on an Amazon PDP? Is it going on your website? Is it going social? Is it going on TikTok? Is it advertorial? If it is advertorial, is it top of the funnel? Are we stopping the scroll? Are we get someone interested, or are we educating them? When we think about that holistically, it allows us to go into a shoot and actually create for that full funnel target, for that full funnel objective. And that's where you save your money, because instead of needing to go back and shoot separate things or re-edit some really, really clunky footage, you're thinking about all the places this can go from the beginning and thinking of a strategy of how this piece of content can be used across all those places, instead of the opposite, which is, here's the content, now you figure it out. We're thinking from the ground up. We know it needs to go here, 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 here. We know it needs to have this impact on the ground level. Let's let that dictate how we're going to build this, instead of the top down, right? So I think that's like the inverse of just how brands are thinking. Hey, we need to be supporting these digital channels. They have their own specific needs, and creative is no longer something that we're going to just add to the pile. It needs to be the driver, and done right, it becomes efficient and it becomes a driver of revenue instead of just this cost center that everyone's like,
well, yeah, I mean, it's just been oversimplified for so long, right? It's viewed as, okay, this is something we need, right? It is a cost center. But, it's funny because you're saying, when we're talking about efficiency, I also talk to a lot of brands around conversion, right? And content plays so much into the conversion aspect that it's just interesting to see this change, where I think we're at this point in time as things slow down just a little bit, they're able to pop their head up, look around, take a deep breath, and kind of reassess what's going on. And, this is just something that's been coming up more just from the standpoint of, people know they need content, and they know it's easy to crank out content, but it's hard to crank out really good content. Content you can kick out easy.
Yeah.
But what you need it to do today, especially when you're spending, more money than you've ever spent, to get people to a site, you have to be as efficient as you can be with those dollars, with those assets. And then what's really interesting then is, are you also thinking about the assets on the direct-to-consumer site outside of just paid media and performance marketing?
We are. We want to make sure there's consistency and there's that brand storytelling throughout. I think it's easier to evaluate the success via advertising than some of those social posts. But you mentioned something really interesting. You mentioned conversion and increase in conversion. So I think that's an interesting place to start, because we have brands that come to us and say, our return isn't where we need it to be, right? And I think everyone's kind of knee-jerk reaction is to say, oh, well, we either need to go to new platforms, or we need to increase budget, or you're going after the wrong target.
It's so true.
It's like, well, what happens before that? What happens before the audience? What happens before the target? What is the thing that everyone's interacting with? It's the content. And so if we don't take a lens and say, and when I say take a lens and like evaluate, our team is taking a very data-driven approach to where we're breaking down the creative that's worked. What type of creative? What kind of ad unit? Was there a model? Was there not a model? How long was it? What was it shot like? Was it edited? Right? We're literally breaking that down. And what we typically do is we want to create a first round of edits for you. So we're going to edit content that you have based on the data that we see. and we can test that out, that will tell us what we need to shoot later. So the other part of efficiency is, let's not go ahead and create a shoot just to create a shoot. Let's test what you have. Let's create a matrix and a forum for figuring out what works. And then that's what will direct us to create new content, right? So when people are talking to me about how do I increase my efficiency, or how do I become more profitable, or how do I increase my ROI, creative is a really interesting place to start. And I mentioned it before, but it's this idea of thumb stop or scroll stop. So the average person goes through like 350 feet of content a day. And I've told you this before. It's mind shattering to me. It's the size of the Statue of Liberty. If you're listening from across the pond, I did the math for an English brand the other day, and it's about the size of Big Ben. So just comparatively, you're going through the size of the Statue of Liberty of content every day. What is your content doing to stop that scroll? What is your content doing to say, hey, look at me, you need to learn, you need to come and check this out? That content is fundamentally different than the content that is going to be middle and bottom of the funnel, where we're educating them, getting them stoked, showing them press, showing them UGC, showing them how to use the product before and after, et cetera. So that prospecting content specifically needs to be built to stop the scroll. That's completely different than the content that's going to be built elsewhere. So when we evaluate a brand and when we evaluate our own brand, we're evaluating the content based on what stage of the funnel is and what the intent or what that content is attempting to accomplish. So not to get into Blue Whale specifically, but we have this thing that we love. It's called our PCE analysis, the performance commerce effect. It's essentially how we look at a brand holistically from the moment a consumer finds the brand to the moment they become a lifetime purchaser. And it's about 15 to 20 KPIs that we evaluate them on. We benchmark them against other brands in our portfolio. And then we use that to kind of qualify and go through and diagnose what could be going wrong or where the areas for opportunity are in this account. And one of the things that we do is break out how we evaluate the creative. So what is your thumb stop? And what is in your prospecting the average amount of people, what percentage of people are watching 3 seconds or more of your video or clicking on it? If that's not 20% or higher, your creative's not doing the right job. You could have the best audience in the world, but if you can't get them to click through, then it doesn't work, right? And then within your engagement, you have to have a completely different set of KPIs and a completely different set of creative. Again, if I'm going to create efficiencies, if I'm going to increase return on ad spend, instead of having to boil the ocean and figuring out how to double your return, I can increase your scroll stop rate and increase the metrics in engagement that creative tells us are leading to people being more engaged, participating more of our ads, right? The tactile thing that is really at the front of this marketing, that should be where we spend a good amount of time. And why don't agencies on the whole do that? Well, they don't have the team. They don't have the skill set. So they would be, a lot of the times, hey, this is the things you need to do, but we don't have the ability to do it for you. So again, I'm very passionate about this, but when we talk about efficiency, when we talk about return, creative really is this kind of unspoken piece that unlocks a lot of that.
No, it's just funny because everybody wants the silver bullet, right? But again, the silver bullet is hard work. That's what it is.
Yep. Well, question for you, because we talked about this the other day. Have you seen that shift from brands talking about these really kind of pie in the sky goals of return from the last 3 or 4 years to a more concerted effort towards efficiency, profitability, and margin control? Is that something that you're seeing collectively as well?
Oh, 100%. It is, when you look at, the financial side of it, marketers are being really pushed by the CFO to justify every single dollar that's been spent.
Yep.
And with that, it becomes an increased pressure to put it into the areas that actually work. And the tough thing, about creative is it takes a while to produce and it takes a while to test. And so for the longest time, people have been kind of putting it off. Yeah. But at this point in time, over the past 6 to 9 months, they've been doing kind of what you're talking about. Well, let me switch, from Klaviyo to Attentive or Attentive to Klaviyo. Let me, test email, SMS, and whatever, maybe I dial back Meta, maybe I ramp up Amazon, and they've tried all these different things. And I think the winners in this space are those, again, that do the testing and learning.
Yeah.
And, my background, I'm a chemist. So I do experiments. And those people that do the experiments, controlled experiments, analyze what's working and what's not, they win on a couple fronts. One is they leave the ads in place that are working, and they get rid of those that aren't, and they can fine tune their spend. But also something kind of like what you're saying is then you can test and learn, and it helps guide your future creative as well. Exactly. And so if you can like really like buckle down, dive into creative, and kind of design it how you're talking about doing it, that's the point in time where I see brands all of a sudden start to see these increased returns. And then everybody's looking at it. It's like, oh, what's the new tool you used? What is the new, what did you bring in? Who is the new partner? They're like, no. Like, it's creative. And it can be done and sometimes, a lot of times it can be done in-house with a change in mindset, with a change in skill set, with a change in tool set.
Yep.
Like, you can affect those three things and do awesome things.
These are things that brands can do, right? Like, this is an operating philosophy of how we should be evaluating our advertising in general. It should be super in-depth control of what your creative is doing. But because of that, your advertising needs to have some controls. You need to be able to, have your audiences separated, make sure we're not crossing over. Because one of the biggest things I see is brands don't separate, or advertising agencies don't separate their prospecting from retargeting audiences. So creative goes to the same different people. It all kind of just goes into a blender, right? Now, not only is we're not being able to be more hands-on with what creative goes to what person, but the data that we're receiving back is not as useful because we don't know if this person had heard of the brand before or is truly a new prospect, right? For an example. So those are things that we have to dig into. Now, one of the things you mentioned is like the testing approach and like leaving things and letting things run. So that's part of what we want to. We don't want to do a complete photo shoot for something that we're not 100% sure is going to work. So when we do our QBRs, for example, whether we're doing the content or their internal team is doing the content, we are breaking down every stage of the funnel, what worked, what didn't, things they need to create, holes in their creative funnel. And if they're going to create it, great. If not, we'll create it. It's qualified coverage. It's just something that has to be done. It's built into every relationship that we have. And one of the things that we started to explore a bit more of is this idea of Frankenstein content. So for us, what that means is there's always kind of been these artificial boundaries that agencies or brands have put on themselves in terms of the type of content they want to express. So a brand video needs to be a brand video. It needs to be glossy and shiny and really beautiful and cutting edge. And then UGC needs to be personal and grimy and not shiny and all of those things that the brand video is not. And what we've found is that threshold for like, this is how you need to speak as a brand, and this is how you need to speak from the user perspective is starting to merge. And users don't necessarily care that your brand message is integrated with a UGC message, which is integrated with a GIF, which is integrated with a video that you shot. And the advantage of it is if you can build the right Frankenstein content. So I'll have start with like, let's say a brand video for 10 seconds to catch their attention. And then it goes right into UGC and it's someone talking about using the product. And then it's a professional talking about the before and afters. And then it's, a collage. That piece of content serves to educate, serves to scroll stop, serves to do a lot of different things. And what it allows us to do is really get evergreen and get that content in Amazon or Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or whatever the algorithm is. And for Facebook and Instagram specifically, this thing like the learning phase, right? Whereas they want you to run creative and campaigns and not touch them. And that's dangerous for brands that want to continually test their creative. They want new messages. They want to be able to move their clients or their prospects through the pipeline. So what this evergreen content allows us to do is have a kind of broader voice, let it run longer and potentially put it in a few different places in the pipeline. And that will allow us to like keep our efficiencies, another place we can keep efficiency, because now we're out of the learning stage. We're paying a fair amount. We're not having to kind of fight the algorithm. We have something that is going to give us some consistency. So that's one piece. And then it's edited. So again, we get to edit this stuff, put it together, evaluate it, and then Q2, Q3, put together a production plan or work with the brand to put together a production plan that fills in the gaps.
Yeah. I want to run something by you from the standpoint of what I've been seeing, over the past few months is these conversations. So over COVID and, the next couple of years there, everybody was signing up with, this seemed like a new tech partner or a new agency partner. It seemed like every other month, right? Is everybody's, what's that?
It was an arms race.
Yeah. Right. Oh, this one, that one, I'm going to add it in. And a lot of people didn't even know what they were signing up for. They just didn't want to miss out on anything.
Yeah.
And so a couple of things are happening right now is we've had a bunch of dinners around tech stack rationalization. And how do I consolidate that? And then what that is now bled into is almost a service provider rationalization. Mm-hmm. Where I have, especially now, we have a lot of marketing teams, middle layer, e-com teams, middle layer being trimmed out as everybody's tightening their belt. And so you have people at the bottom, heads down. You have some people at the top that don't necessarily always understand, digital strategy, but they just want the people at the bottom to keep, cranking out, work. And, in the middle there's 8 agencies that they got to meet with. It's 8 to 16 hours a week. And now I've seen this, just like there's been a consolidation on the tech stack side, this consolidation on the agency side. Like, are you feeling that pressure? Like, how is this evolving with the brands that you're working with?
Yeah, it's a great question. First of all, just on the tech side, I and my team do hundreds of audits a year on brands, right? Where we go in and take a look at their technology, their marketing performance, their strategy. And you're right. The amount of technology that's just in a graveyard that was bought and never adopted, social media, attribution, things that are, $4,000 or $5,000 a month platforms that they're like, hey, we got this. And no one ever figured it out. So You see that where it's just like, oh yeah, we're paying for it. We have another 8 months in our contract, but no one knows how to use it. And
it's crazy, right? But a lot of times the person that signed up for it got let go or hired onto a new role. And then sometimes you're the first one to bring it up. And that's where I find myself a lot of times. I'm like,
I saw a tracker for Grin on your site. And they're like, what? I didn't know that. I'm like, well, looks like you're using it. So I think this the greater trend towards efficiency and kind of away from large spending during pandemics and kind of these goals has absolutely moved its way into the agency conversation. And I think in 2 ways. One is this idea of one throat to choke, right? One conversation to have. So I am a marketing manager or CMO or director. I'm now responsible for a marketplace team, an Amazon team, a D2C team. Maybe my life cycle, my email team and my SEO team are different. Maybe I have an advertising team. Maybe I have a creative person that I'm using, right? And what happens when I have a new product? I have to communicate to each one of those teams separately and educate them and push them through. And then I have to make sure all of those teams are integrated and communicating. And it's a really frustrating piece as marketing becomes kind of more fractured. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of our brands really, really, really appreciate the fact that they can come identify a strategy, execute with, a core team, and then that core team pushes across all solutions. The other piece to that is going back to efficiency and effectiveness. When you have multiple agencies that are responsible for advertising, right? So in Amazon, let's say marketplace versus D2C. What naturally happens is, first of all, these 2 teams, if they're separate, they can compete. They compete for budget. They compete for attribution. They're not really working towards the same goal. And so when we are working omnichannel and we are managing, let's say, all solutions under one bucket, and we are helping them figure out where their customer is, how to communicate to them, where the repurchase happens, we become agnostic to the platform that we're tracking them on. And we just care about getting the customer, getting them for the right price and making sure that we're tracking that. And so if you're siloed still, then those teams aren't conversing. They're not having conversations of like, hey, should we shift the budgets over here? We actually make our contract so the ad percentage on Amazon is the same as D2C. So there's no like exchange rate. So you're like, oh, it makes more sense for me to shift $40,000 from D2C to Amazon. But my Amazon agency charges me 8%. My D2C agency charges me 13%. So I'm going to lose some of the value of that ad dollar. No, that is archaic way of thinking. We need to forecast and think collectively. It doesn't mean every decision is going to be made on an omni-channel basis. But if we're forecasting, projecting, and evaluating that way, we can be more aligned with what their business goals are. Instead of their board as a business goal, they want to hit a certain revenue target. If we shift that from Amazon to D2C and we still hit it, are they really going to be upset? Maybe a little bit. But if we're hitting our goals, they're not. If we miss both because the teams are interfighting and talking about attribution and trying to get more tools and all this kind of stuff, then yeah, both lose. So that kind of consolidation of team, both from an efficiency standpoint and, like you said, headcounts down. So now I don't have 3 or 4 people to manage all of these partners. I have 1 or 2 people to manage this partner stack. So just the efficiency of communication. And then, yeah, from a planning, forecasting, and actually driving that efficiency for the client, it makes, in our opinion, the world of difference.
Yeah, it's just, I totally agree. If you can get there. Right. I mean, you guys can't handle everybody, and there's few people doing what you're doing out there at the level that you're doing it at. But I mean, if it's something to strive for, it makes sense. Right.
And not all brands are ready for it. And we still have some relationships where they ask us to separate those things because they are just not built yet to appreciate that efficiency. And we're kind of helping them get to that point. But yeah, most people recognize the value of it, even if they're not structurally organized to support it.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. On the creative side, how do you tackle, Instagram versus Meta versus TikTok versus Amazon versus direct consumer?
Yeah.
How should people be thinking about, creating the assets or breaking it down based on performance, I guess?
Yeah. So there was a deck that we presented a couple of weeks ago at one of your webinars, I believe. And we really broke down, and if anyone's interested, I can send them. We broke down per channel what the content, how it needs to be built, both in terms of tone as well as like aspect ratio, and then what the intent on that platform was, right? So on organic TikTok, we want sound on, we want focus on trends, we want it to be aspect ratio in a certain way, versus Instagram and other channels are going to be built very different. From an Instagram to TikTok standpoint, we almost think about it as 2 spheres. There's like your social sphere where your Instagram content be edited pretty easily to be used on Facebook, can be edited pretty easily to be used on Pinterest and Snap. And then you have TikTok, right? And TikTok is its own separate beast. It has its own considerations. It has its own influences. And in order to create content for TikTok, you really need to have a tie-in with the kind of social community. You have to understand what is trending. You have to be part of kind of, I like to say, the zeitgeist, right, of what TikTok is. And so we have a couple different packages. We have some packages for TikTok where we're creating content constantly that is more of like TikTok evergreen. It's fun, it's interesting, but it's not necessarily built into, hey, what's happening today? Because the worst thing to do on TikTok is be late on a trend. Makes your brand look, in their eyes, incredibly city. You're 2 weeks late on that. That song is 2 weeks ago. So we have packages where we are building out weekly content in our studio in Brooklyn that is focused on really tapping into what's popular right now. So if there's a song or a sting or a cue or an approach, or for example, right now, as we record this, there's the trend on TikTok about, are you pretending to be in a Wes Anderson movie? I don't know if you've seen this. Everyone shoots their thing like they're in a Wes Anderson movie. You do that in 2 weeks, you're outcast. That was 2 weeks ago. So if that's something that a brand wants to do, we need to be able to shoot that quickly. And so that's where TikTok content moves a little bit quicker. We have, like I said, the studio where we're doing like top down part model, really fun stuff. We also do something we call Blue GC, which is UGC, user generated content, but built by the Blue Wheel team. So we have a fantastic group of individuals. We have over 180 employees here at Blue Wheel. A lot of them are, up and coming social media participators. And so we hire them to create content where it makes sense. That's that quick turnaround where if you're doing that from a traditional standpoint, there's no way you can create your TikTok content. There's no way you can create your social content. But we built into a lot of our content creation for brands where it makes sense, that quick kind of turnaround and focus on building in social. And then the rest of the places, Instagram versus the website versus PDP pages. There's a lot of factors that go into it. The biggest thing is going to be, what are our constraints from the site? How do we build that in? And then again, the whole focus when we break it down is, okay, what channel is it going on? What is the purpose of this content? Are we educating? Are we getting them cited? Are we having them stop the scroll? Are we wanting them to convert like on a PDP page? And then the content will be built in that lens. So I think that's like the real big difference maker is from the beginning, where is this going? That dictating how we build it. And not to repeat myself again and again and again, but traditionally, you're not getting it. Traditionally, you're getting a piece of content. And to me, and maybe to you, I've always thought, yeah, you get a video, you can chop it up really easily and build something, new out of it. And it's just not that simple when you're trying to create really powerful content. So that's really been our focus.
Yeah, are there like common mistakes that people make? I mean, obviously,
are you on TikTok?
Yeah. No, I have an addictive personality, and
I get my.
It was
TikTok
consuming too much of my time.
Like any good old man approaching his 40s. I see TikTok, but I see it in different ways. But even then, it's like we're getting the numbers back from TikTok and the engagement back from our brands, and just what you and I think TikTok is, it's not. It's evolving. It is becoming a resource and a place that people go for information, for hobbies, these really like specific communities on TikTok that you can tie into. So like hair care community on TikTok is absolutely massive. We're working with a couple different hair brands that have seen record sales because their organic TikTok content goes viral for 3 days. And it's nothing that they could recapture anywhere else. Right. So just that idea of like what TikTok is. And I think I joked with you a couple of weeks ago, like sometimes people still think it's 14-year-olds lip syncing in their bedroom. Right. And it's like, there's no economic value there. There's no growth. There's no sustainability. That's just not the case. And the cost on TikTok right now, not to get into the advertising or the organic side, general cost per follower on Instagram, around $3 for us. Cost per follower on TikTok, 30 cents.
That's so bonkers. Right?
And if I told you 10 years ago, hey, you could have your audience on Instagram, I could have you set up ahead of time, what would that mean in terms of your influence? You'd be like, yeah, or I can get you reviews on Amazon before the platform went big. And you can already have like, that's what we're talking about is this arms race to like be present there and what it's that platform is going to become. So, we see its opportunity, but we're also like really, really driving revenue and value from that as well right now too.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, obviously TikTok maybe buy it as a trend that's been around that everybody's like, wow, it really works. The other thing is, the fact that people are using it as like a search engine, right? Sure. Around, videos, how to, fix a dryer, like completely random stuff that would make no sense if you're thinking about it for how it got launched a few years ago, but is heightened around a little, like you're talking about, a community of people.
My social and influencer teams, and this is creative adjacent, but my social and influencer teams, when they're looking at a product, the more unique it is and the more niche it is, the better opportunity they're going to have on TikTok. Right? Even if it's something, well, the masses aren't going to like this. Great. Because there is a community on TikTok specifically that if we can tap into, you can catch like wildfire, right? Like that's when we shift from like does this have mass appeal to, like, it doesn't need to, because TikTok is just essentially a group of engaged communities under, one big umbrella.
Yeah. It's going to be also interesting around creative for, we were chatting about this a little bit, the streaming TV, those ads, and how that is about to take off. Let me
flip that back to you. Is how big of a conversation right now is kind of OTT, more of the, those, I would call them traditional, because it's like, your interconnected TV, but those are becoming a bit more self-service, a bit more access to all brands. Is that a conversation that has picked up?
I put it where DSP was a year and a half, 2 years ago. That anybody who could, or originally like, AMS on Amazon, if you go old school, right? That right now, anybody who's streaming, right? You see a commercial, you see the same commercial over and over again, because nobody's there buying the inventory.
Yeah.
And because there's nobody there, I say a couple of reasons there's nobody there. One is on the brand side, TV ads have traditionally fallen more on the branding side, right? And this isn't branding. This is not spray and pray, right? This isn't just buying $1 million Super Bowl ad and hoping 5 people see it, right? This is, I want to pick people streaming specific channels that have bought specific things in the last specific period of time, and being very, very targeted around demographic, zip code, whatever it might be, and be very, very targeted to, just like any other performance marketing, look, is I'm going to tailor my audience, and I'm only going to send ads to them.
And what do you do once you've tailored that audience? What's the next step?
If you have the ad content to serve the ad, right, like the Mountain platform or something like that, or you probably, a lot of people are using an agency to help them go through, because the Mountain platform is self-serve, but it's kind of like, Sky can be self-serve, right? It's like, but there's 1 trillion buttons to hit.
Yep.
But then what you're able to do in that streaming fashion is you can then get the IP address, hit the network, and then get all the other device IDs so that you can actually track attribution very closely. And that is something, again, that people really want to find and track, is attribution. Yep. And, we're right at the forefront. Like, larger brands, again, are just kind of like, oh yeah, well, I'll send that to the traditional branding who always run TV ads. And there's going to be brands, just like happened, like on Amazon, is they're going to blow up because they're going to start buying the inventory and serving those ads. And those are, again, I think that's going to fall right into what we're talking about for creative. What does that next step of creative look like? Because you can get that engaging and think about it as not brand building, but conversion, targeted market.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned it, and I don't know if you can hear my dog participating in the background, but you have this ultra specified way of delivering content, right? So now I can be localized. I can be hyper targeted with what product they're interested in, what service they're interested. And the extension of that is now my creative can be specific and targeted as well, right? So that high-end video that they created that they would run on every channel, that's just basically maybe 1 to 3 versions of the same creative, that's not going to have the same effect as if I know you're a repurchaser and you're in the Midwest and you care about this. I'm going to, even if it's the first 4 seconds of that video is slightly different, or it has different music, shows landmarks around that area, that is going to increase our conversion rate. And that's where we need to lean into. And that's what, the brands that we work with that purchase on Mountain or any of these, great OTT and cross-platform advertising solutions, that's where they're starting to come to, is like, okay, this is shiny, this is pretty, right? We got to do this. And then wait a minute, we're not using this fully effectively,
right?
Because we aren't targeting our creative as much as we're targeting the actual, ad unit itself. So that 100%, that's such a good connection that is naturally people are really interested in this OTT. This creative piece is going to catch up. So my recommendation to anyone is lead into that. Now, don't over create, don't over edit, don't create 1,000 things. But I've always told brands prior to this, digital is awesome because you can be different things to different people online. Your product is on a shelf. True. It's the same thing to everyone that walks by. It is a bottle of water. that bottle of water online could be fuel for an athlete, or recovery for a partying college student, or necessity for someone that doesn't have it, right? It can take on different things. And for the longest time, last 10 years, I've told people digital is that opportunity. We're taking it a step further. Now we can deliver content in home, specifically attribute it back to revenue really, really tightly. And it leans into that content creation really strongly. So, there's a reason that we've invested heavily both in our team and our studio and all of that, is because this is where we see the evolution of advertising for websites, but for marketplace and, OTT and everything that kind of comes along with it.
Yeah. What are you most excited about?
I got a vacation coming up in early August. I'm going to the beach. Excited in terms of work. That's a really good question. I am excited in general about marketing. I think there are some really interesting attribution softwares, apps, plugins to Shopify, for example, that are really starting to turn the corner. I don't know. Are you familiar with Triple Whale? I don't want to get plug outs here, but it's one of the attribution softwares, right? The big challenge has been Amazon and pretty much Shopify have been having this puffed out chest argument about sharing data.
Right.
And it sounds like those conversations have started to move in the positive direction for marketers and consumers, meaning we're going to start to be able to understand in a bit more detail, A, attribution, and B, attribution between your website and Amazon. That to me is going to unlock this omni-channel. It's going to unlock what creative does across everything. And it's going to allow us to be more effective marketers because we're going to be thinking about the whole picture, right? So what brands want, one throat to choke, more efficiency, omni-channel. What do agencies want? To be able to support their brands more effectively, omni-channel. What does this emerging technology do? It allows us to connect all these pieces. So it really feels like we're on the kind of convergence of all of these things happening and the technology catching up to what brands have always wanted to be omni-channel. We just haven't had the ability to track and the solutions to accommodate. So that's what I think the most excited for in the general way is just where this is all going. And, marketing changes all the time. And we might not be in this heyday of 5-6 years ago, or even 10 years ago, where returns are really easy and clients is really easy, but
anybody could make money.
It makes us better marketers, right? It separates the wheat from the chaff, and you have to have strategy and solution and technology. And that only makes me more excited that it's seemingly more of a challenge, but it just means you have to kind of dig in and really leverage the teams, the resources that you have. So in my mind, Blue Wheel serves a really big piece of that, or it's positioned, let's say, to support in that growth. And so that's as I'm evaluating it all, that's what I'm really excited about.
Yeah. Is there, I picked your brain for the past 45 minutes or so. Any questions you have for me? I always like to give people an opportunity to throw stuff back.
Yeah. Just so your audience knows, I really like to use you as a barometer of what brands are thinking about and what the general kind of temperature of an industry is. And so I always rely, in the beginning of this conversation, are you seeing this trend towards efficiency and away from 3x, 4x goals or 2x, 3x goals? And I think that's been really important. I'm wondering for you, you mentioned the kind of erosion of the middle of the brand world. What other potential fallouts or impacts do you see? Maybe not in marketing, maybe just in the general structure of business. What do you think? What else do you think could be impacted by this change that we're seeing?
That middle layer is the layer of people who really know what's going on. They're providing the strategy. And I mean, and the people that I enjoy like really talking to, right, is on that strategic
like
side.
Me, people that know what they're talking about.
Yeah, and there's a layer that's coming in of people who know what they're doing individually, but not always why and how it plugs in, because they might be fantastic email marketers, but how does that tie into SMS? And how do you do an email flow and build in an SMS flow into your email flow and have 20 of those? And then how does that tie into your tech stack? So whether it's a returning customer, abandoned cart, rewards, whatever it might be, to tie it all in, you have these individualized experts that just need a mentor, and that mentor is gone.
Yeah.
And that's happening over and over again. And it's happening at a time where, like you're talking about, tech is getting so good, so fast, but also so complicated that I think there's almost like a slowing down of the adoption and the potential. You're going to have some brands that really, really figure it out. But you're going to have a ton that just get lost in it, because the digital marketer of today is tasked with so much more than they were 5 years ago. And that's bigger budget, so more responsibility, different KPIs, emerging tech stack that just keeps ever evolving and ever changing. I mean, it's so weird to have like tech that's 3 years old that's out of date.
Right. Or
it's
tech
3
that's
years
like
old.
6 months old that is like a foundation of what you're doing going forward, right? Because this brings up I know I don't want to take too much time, but a question that gets asked of me a lot, and I'd like to ask you the same question: where do you see AI in this whole big picture? Are you concerned, worried, excited? Is it something that brands are asking or talking to you about how they can tap into that? Or is it still kind of a buzzword and a mystery?
Well, a bunch are using it for like writing product descriptions and stuff like that. But in a lot of cases, it gets you 80% of the way there. And usually that 80% was almost the easiest. And so, right. And then it's the editing, the refining, making sure it's on brand. And so there's like about, I'd say, people gauge a 14 to 18% increase in productivity in creating that. Mm-hmm. What's going to be really, really interesting is how fast it's developing. But when they start using it to create assets, right, in real time, or create videos in real time, that's going to be very interesting. I mean, all the different aspects that are popping up, these ones that are looking at overall trends and like on the fashion side, what's moving, what's not, what's on sale, what's not, what colors are, what's the price point, and it can feed back into companies of, hey, by the way, your fast fashion, make a pink and blue skirt, not a black and green one. Yeah. Make it in these 5 sizes, not these 5. And if you put it out in the next 3 weeks, you're probably going to make 100,000.
More like extensions of algorithmic approaches. Like, can we take an algorithm and then teach it to sort and make some decisions based off of that? What I tell brands that they ask me, because they're like, well, AI's out there, you should be using it, and then you should make it more efficient for me. And it's we are in the process of testing. Every department is integrating and figuring out how to use it. But B, I always want my systems and processes to be as efficient as they can before I bring in tools, right? Tools aren't going to fix your advertising if you have the wrong negative keywords, if you're not prospecting, retargeting, right? Like, it's just another thing to add. And one of the things, because we asked the creative team too, like, how are you guys using AI and where do you see it going? And the feedback that they provided is they'll use it for generating part of a script, right? Or to get ideas. They'll use it sometimes for like mood boarding. So we do have some like technology that will go out and find things like what we're looking for so that we can show the customer. What it's not great at right now is creating that new images. We're still in that like uncanny valley where it's not right. AI video editing still needs a lot of help. So it's like these things that could, save you 15 or 20%, but then you have to go in and figure it out yourself anyway. Right. And then like, we're far away from AI video content creation. I don't know if you've seen any of like the horror shows on the internet where they're like, oh, I fed my AI and I told him to write a script for Arby's. And then it's just this like madhouse of, ideas and concepts and visual elements. So that's where we're always due diligence, figuring it out. I think anyone that claims that they've figured it out and they built it in. I don't know if I believe that yet, but I like to use it for a lot of things. I have it in AI. ChatGPT for Excel is incredibly useful. And that it will generate formulas for you based on just like asking it questions. So you don't have to be like that kind of stuff. It's making me more efficient, but in terms of like an agency or how we approach necessarily clients, nothing that we're rolling out yet. So
awesome.
Well, sir,
this has been so much fun, my friend.
Really, did we record this? Or was just us talking, or does this go out?
Yeah, this is this launches next week. So,
well, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your support, friendship, partnership, and
feelings are mutual, my friend. The feelings are mutual. Thanks again for you guys being such great friends, partners, supporters of the network. And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Digital Deep Dive. Thanks everybody for listening in.